It's time for On the Way, our weekly segment on all things considered, breaking down the week's transit news. Joining us, WNYC's transportation reporters Stephen Nesson and Ramsey Khalife, and editor Clayton Guza. Okay, Mayor Mamdani spent much of his first week in office focusing on transit. He announced plans to redesign McGuinness Boulevard in Greenpoint 2 years after Mayor Eric Adams essentially nixed that project. He's fighting for a bike lane on 31st Street in Astoria, and the DOT just smoothed out a notorious bump at the foot of the Williamsburg Bridge that's caused problems for cyclists for a while. What do we think this means for how he might govern in his first term?
Well, obviously, he's into transit.
Yep.
But what you described are really three very different transit projects. But I think Mayor Mamdani is setting himself up as sort of the antithesis of his predecessor. Adams was pretty much known for killing street redesign projects, not necessarily endorsing them. But the McGuinness bike lane is really kind of the crowning example of this. And we know because Adams' top aide, Ingrid Lewis-Martin, was charged in state court for bribery, allegedly given money and a non-speaking role in a TV show in exchange for killing the McGuinness bike lane project. She denies any wrongdoing and notes there was a petition with 6,000 signatures of people against it. That said, here's Mamdani.
Too long, those in power have ignored Greenpointers' calls for help. As a result, what was understood solely as a road became something much larger, an embodiment of political choices, a physical piece of evidence of city government that listened to the well-connected at the expense of working people.
So that's to say, it's pretty symbolic that one of Mamdani's first moves as mayor is to reverse Adams' watered-down version of the bike lane. He's moving forward with the original design, which is turning it into a one-lane road with a parking-protected bike lane on both sides of McGuinness Boulevard.
Okay.
What we're seeing a lot is Adams kind of reversing what decisions that Ingrid Lewis-Martin, right, in McGuinness in this case is tied to a really big ongoing bribery trial.
Right.
But is reversing those decisions. The DOT has these plans on the shelf. It's just executing them in a way that Adams didn't allow them. Now, we still have to see what this means for the larger DOT plan. He says he wants to make New York City's streetscape the envy of the world. That means in a big way taking away space from cars and giving it over to pedestrians. Now, we don't have a master plan from him. We don't have an overall vision. We're still waiting to see what his new DOT commissioner comes out with. But it's going to require political wherewithal. It's going to require community buy-in, and it's going to require him overcoming a lot of controversy and pushback from locals. So that's what these are small things reversing what Adams kind of undid in his 4 years, but what his overall big vision is, we're going to have to wait and see.
Yeah. And one place Mamdani could really run into trouble is in South Williamsburg on Bedford Avenue, where there are members of the Hasidic community who have for decades been fighting against bike lanes there. So remember, this is a 3-block stretch in the neighborhood that used to be a protected bike lane and now isn't. That's because Mayor Adams was lobbied by an influential group within this community to just get rid of it because there were at least 2 kids, and there were videos about it, who were hit by e-bikes when they were crossing the bike path last year. But Mamdani, he's really made commitments on his campaign trail to reverse any of the actions of Adams, the former mayor, on these street redesign projects, including Bedford, Ashland Place, and 31st Street in Astoria, which he just announced he's going to start working on. Here's why that might be a problem. So Mamdani received a last-minute endorsement by an influential rabbi in this community who's openly been against these bike lanes for a long time. I tried reaching the rabbi for comment to see maybe if Mamdani had made assurances to him that he wouldn't touch this neighborhood. So there's that side, and then there's also the side of other advocacy groups like Transportation Alternatives and other pro-transit allies of our current mayor who are expecting progress to make streeters, safer roadways for cyclists in the neighborhood of South Williamsburg.
Okay, congestion pricing reached an important milestone. The tolls went into effect just over a year ago. Officials are touting how it's improved life in Manhattan by reducing traffic and pollution. What comes next, and how could the program be better?
Well, for now, I'm not expecting any major changes. The next change the public is likely to see is a fee increase. That's not coming till 2028, when the daily sort of base toll will go up to $12. And then we'll hit the original fee that was supposed to be $15. That's going to come in 2031. But, one thing backers of congestion pricing would like to see is something called dynamic pricing. For example, in Singapore, they charge different rates based on how congested a certain part of the city is. That's very advanced stuff. They've been doing it since 1975.
Yeah, they know a thing or two about it. Yeah.
But, so far in this last year, one of the biggest gripes I hear from drivers is maybe they enter the zone and only drive for like 3 blocks, and they're charged the same amount as someone who spends all day cruising around the zone. You're only charged once a day. So here's Sam Schwartz, popularly known as Gridlock Sam.
Yeah.
He's one of the architects of congestion pricing. Here's his dream scenario.
My dream is that at some point in the future, we make it much fairer by charging people for how much of the central business district they use and for how long, rather than charging someone who goes 1 block to a garage the same amount as somebody that goes 4 miles from the Upper East Side down to Lower Manhattan.
And, you know, the MTA really just got this off the ground last year. I don't think they're interested in making any dramatic changes like that at the moment.
Yeah.
But another idea people have talked about and have referred to is in London, and they've had a congestion pricing program for over 20 years, and they've expanded their strategy really to relieve congestion and pollution over time. They created what's called an ultra-low emission zone. That's an upcharge on older cars that produce worse emissions compared to newer, more efficient vehicles. And the MTA also, they have to continue showing bondholders that they're producing a steady stream of revenue. They could do that with these new strategies. Other than reducing traffic and improving air quality, that's really one of their top priorities.
State law does allow the MTA to eventually come up with some kind of variable pricing system like they have in Singapore. But really, they have a tool right now that when the city DOT issues a gridlock alert day, right, that's when traffic gets really bad. Like it often happens during holiday season or UN General Assembly when traffic in Midtown gets really bad, that they can surge the price. What is it, 25% on that day? Hochul has said so far that she won't use that. She says, I don't want to touch that. But if she ever loosens that, then she could,
or another governor.
Yeah, or another governor could allow the MTA to tweak that.
Okay. Now, the subway and bus fare is now $3. This is coming in an era when affordability is like the new hotness in politics. So how are riders feeling about that change on the first day?
So I got to speak with some of them the first morning with this new fare increase. And just like the new mayor speaks about the affordability crisis, so are the riders who feel like they keep getting squeezed. So here's Arun Lakshman. He's a 23-year-old commuter at Union Square talking about the prices.
If things aren't affordable, people are going to complain, and I think they have a right to complain because things aren't affordable, that's bad, just very generally.
And here's another commuter, Tom Nyman, who says for a long time he couldn't even afford to pay the fare.
There were times I could not afford that. There were times I used to choose between food and a subway fare. I'm not in that situation now, but others are not.
And the point he's getting to is not that some riders can't afford to pay 10 more cents to ride the subway or the bus. It's that they couldn't afford to pay the $2.90 and the $2.75 before that, before this current increase. So the city, look, they have a fair fares program that subsidizes the ride for some of the poorest residences in New York City. And it's still, at the end of the day, not an insignificant number of people who are struggling to choose between riding or paying their rent or paying for food. And that's just really a larger problem about the cost of living in New York, and that's coming up with this fare increase.
Right, and it's coming as Mamdani takes office with the campaign promise to make buses free, which doesn't solve the subway problem for people having it, but it would make a significant part of the city's transit system fare free, and it would be a pretty corpulent budget item. It would be $700-800 million to replace. But even then, if the governor doesn't necessarily want that, the MTA has said that they don't want that. But there is something that Mamdani can do to at least solve the social contract problem, which is, you pay the fare, you're not always going to get good service, and that's speeding up bus service by adding new bus lanes, giving them priority, using the mayor's fiat over the city streets to improve priority. So that's something that could at least help bus riders, if not help their wallets, at least give them time back in their day.
Yeah, we'll have to leave it there for today. That's WNYC Stephen Nesson, Ramsey Khalifi, and Clayton Guza. You can stay in the know on all things transit or ask a question of your own by signing up for our weekly newsletter at gothamist.com/on the way. My friends, thanks so much.